tonight we have joining us Trent Blizzard, who is the president of NAMA, and we have Grace Sommers, who is our Marek Scholarship Winner, who went to the NAMA Foray, and then Jane Onorati, our webmaster and communications chair, and myself were there. And what I want you all to see is how we all were at the same event at the same time, and we had very different experiences. So to me, that just shows how varied the offerings are. And yeah, it's definitely a fun thing. There are a lot of MMS members who are involved in NAMA at the board level. So you'll see some names and stuff in the presentation. I'm going to first off apologize for how wordy these few slides are. And it's just the first few, but it's just really the info about what NAMA is. NAMA is the North American Mycological Association. So it's comprised of clubs that are in the US and Canada and Mexico. And we're starting to get more people involved in Mexico. There was even a foray there. But it is an amateur organization. There is the Mycological Society of America is the professional organization, and NAMA connects with all those professionals, but it's really for people like us, and it's a citizen science endeavor. If you peek at the brief history of NAMA, it was started unofficially in 1959 as this people-to-people committee on fungi. And Harry S. Knighton was the founder, and it seems that almost immediately it seemed like there was a need for an actual mycological association. So this was formally formed in 1967, and in the 70s, a lot of different states were starting to form mycological associations. Of course, MMS was way early to the game, and we were formed in 1899, like our logo says, which makes next year our 125th anniversary. And there will be a lot of announcements coming up in the new year about some special things we'll do to celebrate that. So we are a NAMA affiliate club. Right now, there are 84 affiliate clubs across the US, Canada, and Mexico. And a lot of committees were formed across NAMA in 1976. A very important toxicology committee was formed, and they analyze and distribute information about mushroom poisonings and keep track of any poisonings that are reported. This is probably a few too many forays listed, but I just wanted to show you how varied the locations are. Every year, a different club or clubs co-host an annual foray with NAMA. So it's basically like we're heading around the country to see where people hunt, follow the experts in their region. The very first foray I went to was this 2009 Lafayette, Louisiana one right here. I was just blown away to be able to go to a completely different terrain and have people show me around and teach me the mushrooms there. Some of the other ones that I've gone to were the Scotts Valley, California. So that's Santa Cruz area. That foray was in December. So when it's completely cold here and you think there's no mushrooms to hunt for, all of a sudden there's a foray because that's their rainy season, and it's mushroom hunting season in January. Or Salem, Oregon, same. I think we were there very late October. And some of these other ones are a bit more like our time. So we were just recently, it was August 24th through 27th, we were in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And there were 4 host clubs this time: the Asheville Mushroom Club, the Mushroom Club of Georgia, South Carolina Upstate Mycological Society, who goes by Scums, and the Blue Ridge Mycological Society. We were in the Blue Ridge Mountains when we were there. So where exactly is Hendersonville? I think my red dot here is actually covering up Asheville. It's very close to Asheville. And as you kind of see in this area, there's Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. We're really close to where a lot of states meet. So you can see that from Atlanta It's not that far. And from North Carolina, there were people who came from Virginia and from up in Washington, D.C. So it's a really tight area there of the Appalachian terrain, where there's lots and lots of species. A lot of the forays, when you first get there, the first night is usually an expert that tells you, this is what the terrain is like. These are the kind of trees you'll see. This is what you need to learn about our area. And I find that really fascinating. Even before we start talking about mushrooms, there's so much to learn. One of the things my husband and I do is just make this a road trip. It's always fun to hear, like, okay, where's NAMA going to be next year and what are we going to see, and start looking at the map and decide what other things are there to see. So this year we decided to drive. So here's us up in Forest Lake, and we did a stop at Cahokia Mounds and did a little climb there. I wanted to see the National Quilt Museum, which was in Paducah, Kentucky. So we swung by Paducah on our way through, did a quick stop in Nashville. Have any of you ever watched that show, Pickers? They've got a store in Nashville, and I remember seeing one of their TV shows where they had found this little mummy. And so Fred was really happy to pose with the mummy. Of course, we had some barbecue while we were in Nashville, and then headed on to North Carolina. This year, the Foray was hosted at the Cayuga Conference Center, and it was one of the larger places we've been. This Foray held 400 people. It's a Christian camp, but we had rented the whole place. So when you went into the dining hall, it was all NAMA people. And there were hotel style rooms, there were cottages and cabins. It was just a really lovely and sprawling place with trees. There were hunts right on the ground. So if you didn't make it on one of the vans to go on one of the formal forays, you could hunt around the grounds and find a lot of diversity. I think Jane can tell you later, they even had camping. So if you were more inclined to pull your little teardrop trailer or pitch a tent, there were camping opportunities, and of course the prices varied based on the level of accommodations you wanted. Again, I wanted to say this is where we each had completely different experiences. So I'm going to share a little bit about what I did. I'm actually currently the marketing chair for NAMA. And it was a big deal for me to meet some people that I've been working with remotely for a long time. One of them was Adam Cohen, and then someone from the San Diego Club who was very active on Instagram. Adam's been organizing the NAMA Instagram account by way of takeovers. So each week, a different person from somewhere else in the world posts pictures. And I had never met him in person, and he lives pretty close. So it was really great to get to chat with him. If you haven't visited the NAMA Instagram account, I would like to recommend that you do so. There's, again, we post a little bit of NAMA business on the weekends. There's webinars and other like book club and other things you can check out if you're a member. Lots of times things get offered for everyone. It just is open to the public. So you can join the Instagram account, kind of see what's going on and decide if some of the things that are offered are of interest enough for you to become a member. There is a different price offered for members of affiliate clubs. So once you're a member of MMS, you get a discount on NAMA, and you'll see that on their website. So you would just check, I'm a member of an affiliate club. But anyway, this is NA North American Myco.org is the website, and also North American Myco is the Instagram handle. As the marketing chair, this was the first year we ever had a merchandise table, and we had one of the artists who actually was a speaker at the Foray had designed this lovely logo of the NAMA logo made out of mushrooms. And Alana Davis here was generous to hang out at the merch table and sell some of the goods. The NAMA Foray logo was chosen by way of a contest. And this was the shirt that we chose, which had the the state frog of North Carolina and a parrot mushroom and a lot of info about the state. And because we had UV night hikes with ultraviolet flashlights, we made sure to print the t-shirts in ink that also fluoresced so that when people were out on their night hike, they could have fun looking at each other's shirts glowing as well. John Lamprecht is the awards chair for NAMA, and he wasn't able to attend this year, but sent me along with the awards to present. John, actually, a couple of years ago, was the Knighton Award winner, and the Knighton Award is given in name of the Harry Knighton, Harry and Elise Knighton, who started the club, and is usually given to people who are being recognized for service to their local club. I actually went to NAMA free of charge this year because I was the Knighton Award winner, thanks to, I think, John and Howard and Ron and a bunch of people nominating me. And this is Phil Carpenter, who won the Harry and Elise Service Award this year. And we were kind of looking at that t-shirt on the silent auction, and he's like, hey, I arranged that foray back in 1998 and told us all about it. So there's all sorts of history, even just on the silent auction tables. The next morning after the silent auction had closed, I ran into Allie Linderer, who's an MMS member, and she's like, look at this shirt I won on the auction last night. And then the person, Carlene Cliver here, who had donated it, said, I won that shirt like 20 years ago on a silent auction at a NAMA foray. And I learned that it was Elise Knighton, or Elsie Knighton, who had donated it. So the founders of NAMA donated a shirt, and here we are 30, 40 years later, it's still on the silent auction being proudly worn and making people introduce themselves to each other and learn about each other. And I think those connections are what an event like this is really all about for me. The one thing I did do that was at the foray was a basket making workshop. So here's Karen Mills, who also was the designer of those pretty NAMA shirts, giving us tips on how to make a foraging basket. So it's someone like Karen makes it look super easy, but once you're kind of in there, it gets a little hairy and it's not necessarily as easy as it seems. But we had 3 hours, and I think we all came out of the workshop with a basket. So my experience so far has included 0 mushrooms. So to be at a mushroom foray and not show you any pictures of a foray or any pictures of a mushroom I found is a little rare, but it just happened to be what my experience was this year. Because NAMA is all about kind of collecting, it's the citizen science of collecting the mushrooms in a certain area. You can see here in 2003, they started the voucher collection project. So each year there's a different location where we're finding mushrooms, we're truly identifying them. And a species that comes in is identified by experts and amateurs. They've got microscopes. They're doing sending them off for DNA testing. So they're identified, photographed, recorded, and then after being displayed for everyone to look at NAMA, they get dehydrated so that they can be added to the herbarium at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. So now if scientists are looking for, say, a certain species from all across the country, they can go to the herbarium and say, gosh, I'm studying Swillis, and I want to see if this species is the same. The one I found in Minnesota, say, is the same as the one I found in North Carolina or South Carolina. Adele Mehta, who I believe is on the call tonight, has been the NAMA voucher collection recorder for, Adele, you might have to speak up here and let me know. I think it's 20 or 25 years. So Adele's experience at the NAMA foray is quite different. She's in a room like this watching specimens come in and get identified and photographed, and she's entering them into the database for them all day. When it's a really good year, there's hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of specimens coming in, and they want to keep up so that when the foray is over, they can be dried and sent to the field museum. Adele, are you on? Can you unmute? I think we had a record-breaking year this year.
Yes, we did. We had 537 unique species identified so far.
So some of that work's still happening, it sounds like.
Right. Some of the professionals will take specimens that are previously unidentified or even unknown and take another look at them, and sometimes they come up with new species.
Wow. Yeah. So you could be someone who's just hanging out at NAMA because you want to look in the woods, and you might find a new species to science. Thanks, Adele.
Thank you. I can't turn on my video because I lose connection.
Okay. And then I want to introduce Jane Onorati, who was also at the Foray, and you will see that she had a completely different experience than I did.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jane Onorati, and I think, like I said, Kathy was busy, but when I go to a NAMA Foray, I don't usually attend any workshops or hardly anything. I'm all about the forays. That's what I'm there for. So I want to tell you a little bit to continue about the voucher collection project and how the participants at the Foray get involved in that. We go on the forays, and then we're told to deliver our specimens after each foray to the collection room that you saw the picture of just now. And then we fill out, or at least we're asked to fill out an ID card if we haven't filled out one in the field, at least with the name and of the foray and our name, and some other things if we can. And I think this was the first time I actually did that. So I didn't put a lot on them, but it's a start. But what I enjoyed was that there were people there. Can you back up a second? There were people there that experts to help me identify my finds. So I learned I learned a lot that way. And then later on, I uploaded my photos to my iNaturalist account, which I started a couple of years ago, but I really have only used it very much this year. Go ahead. So this is an example of one that I found at a NAMA Foray and then later uploaded to iNaturalist. Cortinarius semi-sanguineus. There's one that doesn't have semi in front of it too. And I didn't know what it was, but someone there at NAMA told me what it was. Go ahead.
Jane, that's the one that people like because it's one of the few that dyes wool red. This color here, it's one of the most sought after dyeing mushrooms.
Yeah, and that photo doesn't show the cap, but the top of the cap is also the same color.
Wow.
Very bright and colorful.
So beautiful.
One thing that I thought was kind of fun was when I was wandering around in the collection room looking at what other people had brought in, I saw this. And I thought, God, that's just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And found out that it's called Calostoma cinnabarinium, or hot lips is one common name for it. Go ahead. And then later, I was fortunate enough to find some on my own. After I left the NAMA Foray, after it was done, I spent some time in North Carolina and Virginia camping and hiking, and continued to look for mushrooms. And these are a couple of pictures of that species that I found. Also, one thing that I learned about at the NAMA Foray was they talked about it at some of the evening talks, and also I saw them on the collection table. Some of the choice edibles that they pointed out to us, Lactofluus volemius and Lactofluus corygus, and those actually they used to be called Lactarius volemius, but there's been a name change recently. Some of the Lactarius have been moved to Lactofluus, but I'd never heard of these mushrooms before or seen them before in Minnesota, to my knowledge. And after I left, I did collect some while I was at NAMA, and then after I left, I collected more. And they're a nice mushroom, both of these, but I found this one and felt more confident in IDing it because it's a little more hard to mistake, to me at least, than with anything else. And also someone had identified one that I found. And what I did was, I collected these and I cooked up a lot of them and added them to some of my meals when I was camping, and they are just the yummiest mushroom, one of the really yummiest mushrooms I've ever had. So when I got home, I was thinking, God, where can I get some more of those mushrooms? And I was wondering whether or not they were found locally. So what I did was I went to iNaturalist, and there's a way that you can search you can search for any mushroom or plant or whatever, and see, the distribution of it, where people have found it before. So for Lactofluus corygus, which the one that I had been collecting and enjoying, that one's pretty much not really Minnesota, and not really even that much, in below that too, but definitely a lot, on the east side of the US. Now, on the other hand, if I searched for Lactofluus volemius, that one is look like a little bit more likely I might have some luck with. And I guess I'm just going to have to get good at identifying that one. And when I was searching iNaturalist, I kind of zoomed in and clicked on some of them that were in the Minnesota area, and found that 2 of them were actually from an MMS foray in July in Kinnikinnick State Park this year. So I thought that was pretty funny to me, and also gives me confidence that I can probably find some of these. I did do a little Googling, and I also found that local chef Alan Burgo, who has the Forager Chef site, has an article with some recipes on his site for Lactofluus volemius. So, and he really raved about it, I think. He really likes this mushroom. So I think it's worth trying to learn and collect them to eat.
Awesome.
And that's about all I have. The only thing that if we have some time later, I could show you how I did the searches on iNaturalist if you want.
Awesome. Yeah, I would add actually, and I ran into this when we were working on the field guide too. It's that, there's these data sets and you're like, gosh, I wonder if this is found here. And I think Jane's story really, really points out the importance of documenting our finds. that she sees that it was found on an MMS Foray, and now we have dots in Minnesota. There might be species that are found here, but if no one's documenting them, it's kind of like that thing where it's like, oh, if it's not on Facebook, it doesn't exist kind of thing. But really, it's really about the documentation and sharing of the data that makes the data more real. It's there might be more people here who are hunting and posting. We might be finding them here and not posting. So it's going to look like it doesn't occur here when really it does. And I can vouch for Alan Burgo liking them. I think one of the first times I met him, I was talking to him to do the MMS cooking demo. And so I met him at the restaurant he was working at, and he's like, look what I got. And he had this giant bag of them. And at the time I was like, oh, I don't even know what those are, and I've never eaten them. So it was definitely found locally, and he's definitely a fan of them. So yeah, I love the idea of our MMS forays documenting what we found on iNaturalist, because I think it really just sort of shares with the world the truer story of the mushrooms here. And before I introduce Grace Sommers, I wanted to just mention those of you who are new to the club may not have seen some of the stories we did about our old pal Marek. Marek is who we named the NAMA scholarship after. He was someone who would go on as many of the NAMA annual forays with us. We would plan on it. The year that he got sick was when we were planning the one in Cable, Wisconsin. And that was one of his goals, was to be there. And when that didn't work out and we lost our good buddy, we decided that it was fitting to send someone else in his honor and in his memory to have the experience that he would want someone to have. And this year it is Grace.
Hello, my name is Grace. I use she and they pronouns. A short intro to who I am, because I am fairly new to the Minnesota Mycological Society. I am currently working as an environmental educator at Osprey Wilds. So for Osprey Wilds Environmental Learning Center, it's up past Hinckley. It used to be called the Audubon Center of the Northwoods, if you have heard of that. Many people haven't. So what I do on a daily basis right now is I go into the woods with mostly 4th through 7th graders, but sometimes really anyone can come up. And we take people out into the forest and talk about what we find and do a lot of different sorts of education, which often you end up finding some cool mushrooms around and about. So it is pretty cool. I have had the opportunity to really be able to explore and learn more about mushrooms in the past year, as well as sort of over the past 4 years is really when mycology has become a much larger part of my life. And part of the reason that I applied for this scholarship to go to the NAMA Foray was the idea of saying, as I'm in environmental education, going outside, how can I bring fungi into more aspects of my life? Because as with most other spaces, fungi aren't really a centered aspect of environmental education. So thinking about how this can be part of both my life, but also the work that I do. So I was very excited to go to the NAMA Foray, and also slightly overwhelmed by the fact of being in a place with 400 other people. COVID, haven't been around 400 people that I don't know in a while. So going to a place with 400 other people was intimidating to start off with, but then also going to a place where I am not the person in the room who knows the most about fungi was really exciting and also very intimidating. In my daily life, most of the people who are around me think fungi are cool, but that's about where it stops. They talk to me and then they say, wow, you really like fungi, don't you, Grace? And I say, yes, I do. So going to a space with other people who were also super passionate about fungi was very exciting. And also the sense of, as a person who's done most of my learning on my own, saying, ooh, these people can teach me a lot of things in a way that's also sort of intimidating. So as I was going into the NAMA Foray, I was thinking through what my experience wanted to be. And I think I also, similar to Jane, put a fair bit of emphasis on forays. So I got to go on 2 different forays while I was at NAMA. The first one was a sort of morning foray. There were some like half-day forays. There were some shorter ones, and then there were all-day forays. So the first one that I went to was, I believe it was called a Game Highlands foray. It might have been Gameland High. I got the name mixed up quite a bit. But what it meant was that we got to drive higher up into the mountains to go and look around in the area where we were, which had like a little stream running by. It was very wooded. One of the things, as a person who's grown up in Minnesota, one of the things that really blew me away about being near mountains is how elevation change can change so much about the entire ecosystem that you're going through. So it's about tree species, plant species, anything that's around, which really gives space for a lot of different types of mushrooms to be found at the same time of year. You go up the mountain, and at Cayuga, it was like 80, 90 degrees. You go up the mountain, it's like 70, 80 degrees. And you have a much different experience wandering around in these different areas. And what you find is incredibly diverse, that we don't really get that experience in Minnesota, where if you go north, you'll see that sort of different change, but that's driving for multiple hours. Whereas here, you drive for 45 minutes up a mountain and you're somewhere entirely different. The weather feels different. What you're seeing is really different. On this foray, I think for both of the forays that I went on, I'm going to highlight the mushroom that I found that not necessarily I found, but that was found on the foray that I thought was coolest. And one of the mushrooms that we were able to find, actually on both of the forays that I went on, but I saw it first on this one, was a parasitic bolete, or Pseudoboletus parasiticus, I think is how you pronounce it, Pseudoboletus parasiticus, which is a type of bolete that parasitizes an earth ball. So it grows out of the fruiting body of the scleroderma, and then is this just tiny little bolete that is growing there. Super cool to be able to see. And from what I understood, also might be locally more common, but somewhat globally rare to be able to see this mushroom. So that was very incredible. And I think on the second foray that I went on, didn't get a picture of this, but there was a whole set of them fruiting from the roots of a tree that had fallen over, which was wild. So this was the first foray that I went on. The left-hand picture is a picture of the people that were on that foray. The second foray that I went on was an all-day foray. So I left in the morning and then got to head off and go into the woods for a day, which is one of my ideas of a perfect day. So we got to go to a place that was described as the Yosemite of the East, where we drove higher up in the mountains, but then hiked down to this beautiful waterfall, going on this whole hike down to this space that opened up to this waterfall. There were mushrooms all the way down. As we were walking, one of the guides for this, so each of the forays had sort of a couple of leaders that were responsible for making sure that everyone was there and getting to and from the place and coming back together, and also helping to identify or like find other mushrooms along the way. One of the people who was walking with us was, I have forgotten their name, but they run a company and an Instagram account called I See Fungi. I see as in like to see with your eyes, fungi. And he goes out and finds mushrooms and then clones them and is able to cultivate mushrooms, a much wider diversity than I had heard of in the past. I hadn't heard of a ton of people cultivating chicken of the woods, but he had been able to do that. So I think part of what I enjoyed about these forays was the chance to get to have more like smaller groups of people to be able to talk to and interact with, where in the large group settings, 400 people, it's hard to say who is open to having a conversation right now. But when you are in a group of about 20-ish people, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, you find more of those smaller conversations as you're hiking. And then someone sees a mushroom that they think is really cool, and then you can go and look at that mushroom with them and find all of these different things, make observations. So on this foray, the mushroom that I found that was most exciting to me was a mushroom that I still don't know what it is. I think it might be a type of Romaria, but it was this beautiful little coral mushroom that was growing on a boulder behind the waterfall. So when you got all the way down to this beautiful waterfall, you could walk behind it. And I went behind and found this boulder that had at least 4 different species of fungi on it. And one of them was this beautiful little purple coral mushroom that had this sort of fuzzy base. And it was probably the mushroom that has stuck with me the most from my time there. So I got to take those mushrooms as well as other ones that I found and then bring them back to that vouchering room that we've been talking about earlier, which was really just stunning to see. I don't know why I didn't take a picture of it, but I didn't. So it was this huge gymnasium space with so many tables filled with people and mushrooms, and they were categorized by general type of mushrooms. So like you could go and look at the coral mushrooms, or you could go and look at the earth, like all of these different types of mushrooms. And then there was the aliens table of mushrooms that people hadn't identified yet, or they're like, these are weird ones and random. And so I really enjoyed going around and just seeing all of the diversity and seeing mushrooms that I had never seen before in finding, like I had never seen a cordyceps before, and yet people were finding cordyceps and bringing them back. And you could see real specimens of those to be able to see in person, which was amazing and really blew me away. Also, just seeing all of the people working so hard around the clock to go through all of these mushrooms and the really team effort that was at work to categorize them, do the initial one, the experts who were doing more specific identification, Adele who was recording everything, people who were taking tiny samples to do DNA barcoding later, and then the like whole slew of dehydrators that were over in the corner working to start dehydrating the mushrooms so they could go back to the fungarium at the Field Museum. So I think seeing science in action was something that was really big for me at the Foray, and then also being able to see that, like participate in that, felt really welcoming into that environment. Besides the Forays, the other thing that I did while I was there was I took a workshop on DNA barcoding. So I am someone who really enjoys science and the more sort of technical side of mushroom foraging. And so one of the things that I thought would be really interesting to learn more about is the process of sort of after you find a mushroom, what happens to be able to identify it? If you're going a little bit deeper, not just like, okay, I'm looking at the visual cues of what this mushroom is, what do people do? I have a natural science background in my education, so I had some context for this already. And I was able to go to this workshop, which was run by Mandy Quark and then also Kyle Kanan, who runs the Ohio Mushroom DNA Lab. Part of this workshop also meant that we could bring in specimens and then get them sampled and help with at least the initial stages of the sampling process. What really blew me away was the fact that when you are taking DNA barcoding samples, you need the tiniest piece of a mushroom imaginable. You need to be able to see it, but barely. So you're taking this whole mushroom, which sometimes if you imagine like a 17-pound hen of the woods or chicken of the woods, most of that mushroom you do not need for barcoding. You need the tiniest little piece that's like a speck of dust that ends up in this test tube, and then they add various chemicals to it to isolate a small part of the DNA that then is able to be replicated. So they take this region that is unique in the DNA to most mushrooms, and then they replicate it and run it through a program, which spits out the DNA barcode for that mushroom, which then you can compare to existing databases. I'm seeing a question in the chat about DNA sequencing being really expensive and that mushroom sequencing being cheaper. So how does that get funded? Part of it has to be, what's really cool about this was that they were doing these for free. Part of it involves fundraising and things, but what I learned at that workshop is that really the most expensive piece is the reagents. So the chemicals that they're using are the most expensive piece to be able to run these sorts of reactions. And those can be slightly expensive, but a lot of the equipment is more accessible. It's like an upfront cost, but then it is more accessible to people because you aren't doing a full DNA sequence. So when they've done full human genome sequencing, they are looking at all of the DNA that is in a cell or whatever sample they are. Whereas in this, to be able to identify something, so many fungi and animals and plants share most of their DNA. I think it's something like humans share like 80% of their DNA with a banana, I think is one of the statistics that I've heard. So there are things like most most organisms share a lot of similar DNA. So if you're trying to figure out what something is, you don't actually want all of the DNA. You want a small snippet of it that's going to tell you the most information that's specific about that organism. There is a specific region in most fungi where you get the variation that leads to all of the diversity of mushrooms that exist. And some of them, I think chanterelles were one of the examples, you have to go sort of to the sides of that region, but that specific region of DNA is what you're looking for and what can tell you all of the specific information. So it's sort of like being able to look at a mushroom's hair color and eye color and things like that, but in their DNA. So what makes it that way? And that really is what allows it to be accessible and also done like day of. So the mushrooms that we were sampling and the fungi that we were sampling, they were running that DNA that day, and it would be ready by like, I think it was the next day. It was 24 or 48 hours. So these reactions can happen really fast, and you can get the actual process of sampling is not the process that takes the longest amount of time. What really takes a lot of time is getting the mushrooms to the people who are doing the sampling, doing the various processes, and they can run multiple sequences at the same time. You get the sequence out. And then a part that I had never heard of before was the idea of validating the sequence. So having people who are both doing the barcoding, so you get that string of, it comes out as like a string of letters, A, T, C's, and G's, if people have heard of, like, done anything with DNA before. It comes out as that string, but then you need to compare that string against all of the existing database. So that DNA validation is a step that I learned they don't have a ton of people doing. So there isn't as much energy being put into the work of comparing the DNA sequences that we have with the DNA sequences that we're finding. And so being able to map out how those mushrooms fit into the whole evolutionary chain and how they're related to one another is something that is still being worked on and is part of this active process of, I think most of the time I experience it as, oh, that mushroom got a new name. This is how that mushroom is getting a new name and why it's getting a new name, so that we can get to know them a little bit more specifically. So that's some of the sciencey bit behind what we were learning in this workshop. But one of the practical takeaways that was really cool was being able to bring in mushrooms to be able to identify and have them barcode. We could bring in mushrooms that were sort of mystery mushrooms that we'd found. So the picture on the right is a mushroom that I was able to learn at NAMA by talking to Ariel Bonkowski, I think is how you pronounce her last name. She's up in Duluth. She knows a ton about mushrooms and is sort of a prolific Minnesota iNaturalist identifier. My guess is if you've posted anything on iNaturalist about mushrooms, she's probably identified at least one of your observations. I was able to go to her with some pictures of this mushroom and a little sample of it and say, do you know what mushroom this is? Most of the people in my life come to me with that question, and I try my best, but I don't have that much information. So being able to go to someone else and say, do you know what this mushroom is? And she said, yes, I do, was really incredible because I had been wondering about this for a long time. It turned out to be an orange polypore, or Oranthoporus croceus, I think is how you pronounce that name. It looked almost like a chicken of the woods, but smelled very fruity and was not a chicken of the woods in any way, shape, or form, and stained bruised purple. So I found this mushroom and said, what is it? And I was able to then identify it, but then they were also able to take a piece of it to do DNA barcoding with it. We also were able to bring in mushrooms from the store because they're starting a new project of saying, okay, so many people sell dehydrated mushrooms in the stores, but we don't actually know what mushrooms they're selling. A wild mushroom mix might be finding some Agaricus bisporus in that wild mushroom mix. So trying to figure out, what are people actually selling? And that's not even going into all of the mushrooms that come from overseas here in dehydrated mixes. That, like, are they the same species? What do we know? So that's an ongoing project that you can submit mushrooms to be able to get DNA sequences for it. So that was a lot of different types of information, but I think the DNA barcoding workshop was really a way to get a sort of back-end view of saying, okay, after this is done, after I go home from NAMA, what's going to keep on happening? As Adele was talking about, people going back, experts going back home and continuing to do work on these mushrooms that we found there. This is one of the things that they're doing, of taking these DNA sequences and then figuring out what was there and what we found and who we were talking to, not just people, but also who we were interacting with in terms of the mushrooms that we were finding. So overall, as we come, those are sort of the main things that took up my time while I was there. I think in between, there were a lot of things with meeting people. So I got to room with one of the other scholarship recipients. So Krista is the person in that photo. She goes by Fungal Forager out in Idaho, doing a lot of mushroom education there. But I was able to have a lot of times to connect with people, especially at meetings. I got to meet one of the people who did a presentation on her grad work for MMS, I think in May. Aishwarya was talking about her research, got to meet her there. Got to meet people who I had volunteered with in the past. So Tiffany Thaden was the person who designed the logo for the shirt. And I'd done work with her with the fungal diversity survey. And then I got to go on a foray with her. So I think there were a lot of times of connection and community, seeing people who were just attending the event, but then also seeing the community of people that were working super hard throughout the entire event. Kathy, Trent, everyone who was there, doing an incredible amount of work to make that happen, both on the side of the science, but also on the side of just all of the other logistics to make this event possible for people like me to attend. And then also to be able to deepen that scientific understanding of the individuals who attend, as well as beyond and going into the future of being able to provide education and specimens for that to carry forward. And I think there were toddlers going on these forays, and there were people who had been at NAMA forays for over 20 years. So there was a huge range, and I think that there were offerings for everyone there. There were people who just went to the talks that happened throughout the day, which I didn't go to any of them besides the evening keynotes. There were people who went on forays like me. There were so many different experiences and ways to step into that space that I think I came in feeling really overwhelmed. But by the end, I felt like I had found people and found a space to exist in the NAMA foray that felt really welcoming to me and really inspiring to carry through in my life.
Thank you. That makes me so happy to hear. Like you described it all better than I could ever. I'm so excited that you went, and actually excited that I got to hang out with you a couple weekends ago up at Osprey Wilds as well, which is, like you said, a beautiful, beautiful place to be. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. I wanted to next introduce Trent Blizzard, who will say a few things about NAMA. Trent, maybe you're going to chat about the scholarships. I know NAMA did a ton of scholarships this year, and I'm only going to do a mini brag that a lot of the scholarships from NAMA were patterned after our Marek Scholarship, and just the excitement, like you heard from Grace, coming out of it. Just how do you get someone to NAMA who wouldn't necessarily usually go or find the time, because we all have busy lives, especially in jobs, and it's a financial undertaking. So to get some fresh eyes to NAMA and then share that information with us, to me is like Marek's smiling down on us for sure. So thank you so much, Grace. And hey, Trent, I wanted to every time you introduce me, you do an embarrassing picture of me. So I was gonna pay you back.
Well, that's not an embarrassing picture of me, though.
All right, so now I'm gonna stop sharing. Yeah, I tried to list all of the mycological societies you're part of, and I'm guessing I probably got about half of them here. So.
So yeah, thanks, Kathy, Jane. It was fun to see you there too. Grace, for sharing your experience. Also Adele. Hi Adele. It's good to see you here, or at least hear your voice. And Kathy, you said something, that picture of the NAMA logo, did you say that was a parrot mushroom on the top of the frog?
Yes, I thought.
Oh, very cool. Good. I didn't realize that. I just learned that. So I'm just going to talk a little bit like big picture about NAMA and just kind of invite people that want to get involved to get involved. Here I have some of the opportunities that might interest you per this last presentation that just happened. We obviously have our forays. We have 2 forays this year coming up in 2024. We're going to have one in August in Arizona. That one is about to be officially announced, I think. And that is going to be a smaller regional foray, probably about 100 people, and is going to be very culinary focused. So it's going to be a little different than some of our other events with a lot of food stuff going on. And then our bigger annual foray, which will have 250 plus people, will be in Randall, Washington in 2024 on Halloween weekend. So it'll be pretty late at the end of October is when that event will be. And that's a good time up there for chanterelle and matsutake and who knows what else. There should be lots of mushrooms up in the PNW in that area in the fall. So those are obviously 2 great ways to get involved. Now at these events, NAMA does using the monies from its members from our membership dues. We do pay for vouchering at these events. So the science that and the scientists to ID and preserve these mushrooms and get them into the facilities. We also do the DNA testing at the event and pay for that. And we also bring scholarship students. That's a pretty exciting piece Kathy alluded to as well. That I think this year we did 16 or 17 scholarships between our Mexico foray, our annual foray in North Carolina, the Appalachian NAMA, and the MSA scholarship we do. So we're doing a lot of scholarships. Did my screen just go away? With your monies, and
Your screen's shared, yeah.
There we go. Okay. So there hopefully will be some scholarship opportunities if you're looking for those. We have our monthly book club, and each month there's a different book discussed. Sometimes the author's included, sometimes not. I think that's well, we'd have to check our calendar for me to tell you the date. We do about 12 webinars a year. They tend to be pretty heavy during the non-mushroom hunting months. So they tend to pick up steam in the fall, and then we start wrapping them up by June, usually in the next year. We have a quarterly microfile, and we also have an art contest. Sounds like you're going to be talking about your art contest next. The other opportunities that you might look at are our committees. We have quite a few active committees. Here's a sample list. Our culinary arts committee is very busy. They meet twice a month. We have a medicinal mushroom committee and a cultivation committee that meet monthly. A toxicology committee, education, visual arts, which is a fun one. Our voucher committee, which is in charge of that kind of vouchering effort at the forays. We have a DNA committee, which is a newer one, and they're in charge of the DNA activities at our forays, as well as the kind of overall creation and support of sequencing. We have a conservation and stewardship committee, but then those are topical. We do a fair number of organizational administrative committees like marketing. That's the one that Kathy chairs. Yay, Kathy. Our foray committee, we have a web admin and a finance. The awards committee, which John Lamprecht has chaired that for 2 or 3 years now, I think. And I think his term is coming to an end now. We have a club relationships committee. So there's a lot of ways and places to get involved. Most of these committees meet monthly. Some meet more or less often, depending on the committee. So if you think you might want to, step up and support NAMA, you can go to our website and sign up, and then all these various happenings become available to you. Kathy, I think that was all I wanted to suggest. I think maybe you were going to wrap up here and also do the photo contest stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Trent. It's
Okay, thanks, everyone.
it's like when we had at the NAMA Foray, they had all the van drivers for the forays come up on the stage, and they barely all fit. And I was like, holy cow, that's how many volunteer drivers we have. Once you see all the committees listed, you kind of forget all the different things that are going on behind the scenes. Yeah, that's and a lot of it. Again, like you said, we just finished this foray, and you're already working on one for Arizona in the summer, and then of
Yeah.
course the one next year, it kind of starts right back up. So there's no excuse to say there's nothing to do for mushrooms in the winter. There's like you said, webinars and book club, and there's other places to go visit if you're so inclined. Yeah, so thank you again.